the Florida Writer Podcast, a discussion about writing and other things.
Hello, and welcome to another edition of the Florida Writer Podcast with your host, Alison Nissen. And today I am lucky enough to be with Laura Gariepy. Laura, welcome to the Florida Writer Podcast.
Thank you so much, Alison. Excited to be here.
Could you give us a 60-second elevator pitch about who you are and what you write?
Sure. So as you mentioned, I'm Laura Gariepy. I am the owner of Everyday by the Lake, LLC, a written content creation company for small business owners and online publications. I reside in Winter Haven, Florida. And for folks who are unfamiliar, that's about an hour south of Orlando. I do, in fact, live on a lake, so hence my business name. I primarily write nonfiction in the personal finance, careers, and entrepreneurship niches. I have written for household names such as Fortune, the New York Post, USA Today, and other notable publications. I primarily write blog posts, but I have written social media content, newsletters, and website copy for other clients as well.
Well, you are quite busy and you have a variety of things you like to write about, or should I say?
I guess you could say medium or type of content. Most of what I produce is digital, so it would be online. I have written some brochure copy that's been printed out, but that's more of a one-off.
Do you find that there's a big difference between writing an article for an online news source versus a blog?
Yes. So, even the online news sources will say that their articles are part of their blog, but there's a difference between, say, a blog post on the New York Post versus a blog post on just some random website. Generally, the bigger name clients are going to be more formal. They're going to request or require a lot more fact checking for the information that you include. And oftentimes they'll require you to interview expert sources for the piece as well.
That's really interesting. So freelancing is something that writers who wish to write full time can do to support themselves.
Yeah. There are a number of wonderful staff writer positions out there. And from time to time, I'll admit I've been tempted by the allure of a full-time paycheck with benefits. But by the same token, it's pretty amazing to be able to select who you want to work with and when you want to work and have that freedom and flexibility. And, if you cobble together enough clients, you can meet or exceed what you'd earn as a staff writer.
How do you find your clients?
Honestly, a lot of it is networking and word of mouth. So it's definitely important to keep building that circle around you. I'm not a huge fan of cold pitching. So generally, I will try to build a rapport with the client before I approach them and ask them to do business. But generally, my main source of work is through getting referrals and, speaking with other freelance writers that may know of opportunities.
How did you make those connections?
A lot of time spent on social media. So I broke into freelance writing by starting a blog. And at one time, I wrote a guest post for a prominent website at the time in the personal finance space. And I didn't realize that I was going to get paid for it. So it was kind of like an aha moment. But all the while, I had been cultivating relationships, but just by commenting and connecting with folks within that niche on platforms, especially Twitter, now known as X. And really building those relationships without really knowing at the time what those relationships were for. But once I got paid for that first article and I had my light bulb moment, I said, oh my goodness, I need to start tapping into this network of connections that I've built. And very quickly thereafter, I started to, make other connections that proved to be lucrative in the form of clients.
How many hours a day would you say you spend on social media?
Oh, geez. Not as many as I used to, I would say. Um, just because like the machine that I've built kind of works for me now. You know, once you're started and you have some momentum, and you have a lot of good clips in your portfolio, it's definitely easier to build on that. You know, when you're starting from ground zero, it takes a lot more effort and perseverance, I think, to really get your foot in the door. And once you're in the building, um, it's not that difficult to stay there. I will say another way that I acquired clients early on was by attending an industry related conference. It's called FinCon. It's been going on for more than a decade now, and it's where all kinds of financial media people and major brand names within the personal finance space kind of come together. And so oftentimes those brands are looking for writers. So it just happened to be kind of kismet in a way that the conference came to Florida in 2018 as I was launching my business. And I won a scholarship to attend. And so everything just kind of aligned. And I wound up picking up clients there too. Like I had started getting paid work, but this really helped me accelerate it. And so for anyone looking to kind of break into the freelancing space, I would definitely recommend trying to find conferences or other meetups where lots of folks that you could potentially do business with gather. That way you can make those connections kind of rapid fire. And it's usually easier to kind of solidify a new relationship when you're face to face versus going back and forth online.
So you've mentioned that your portfolio has grown. How do you showcase your portfolio?
So for a time, I had it on my own website. Admittedly, I've gotten a little lax with that just because updating that can be more complex based on the layout that I have there. So now I've switched over to something called Contently. It's free. So basically, you just create a profile for yourself and then you can put in links to your work and name each link. So basically, many of the places I write for give me an author page on their website, and then the author page will have a list of the things that I've written for them. And so I just put a link to my author page for each client on my Contently portfolio. So if a prospective client or some other interested party clicks on that link, then they'll be able to see everything I've written for that particular client. So I really like the way that Contently organizes that. So I will say that I'm a fan of them, but I also will put a caveat there that you don't own Contently. And so anything could happen to that website. So I do definitely advocate you having a backup of some sort to retain your most impressive career accomplishments. So that site goes down, gets acquired, shut down, whatever weirdness can happen in the online space, you still have proof that you've contributed in some way. And that's why I started my portfolio on my website. Laziness got the better of me, but I am definitely an advocate for owning your space online.
Well, that's very true with the owning your space online. I have a couple of websites, and one of them, I paid for the very minimum amount. So I pay for that. It's maybe, I don't know, $5, $10, $15 a year or something. It's really cheap. And they had an update and nothing saved.
Oh,
It was like, no, I went back to look. I was like, no, no, no. So fortunately, I mean, I have everything somewhere else, but still you're like, oh man, because it does take time to make it look good. And then, but I do like the idea of having it sort of in multiple places. I guess you could always have like a Google Doc or a Word document where you have all the links. And then if something, the links break, that's a whole nother story.
it is. Yeah, a lot of the pieces that I wrote, 3, 4 years ago are no longer active, which is kind of a bummer, especially if it was a client that I was proud to have written for. And so that's just kind of the nature of how it works writing online. So that's just kind of more incentive if you're a freelance writer. You always have to be pursuing new work, because you never know when the achievements you've made prior are no longer going to be provable. Everything can kind of just fall into this digital black hole. And if you can't show a link that you've done it, then have you really done it? That's kind of how it works these days.
Do you advocate saving a screenshot or anything that, I mean, I know everything can be manipulated, but.
Sure. I mean, maybe if you retain the drafts as a Google Doc, or maybe if you try to print out some of the articles, especially if you're printing them offline, it'll have the URL at the time, it'll have the date, and so they'll be kind of preserved that way. So if it's something you're super duper proud of, I think that's a viable option.
It is. It's just a really fascinating avenue to take. And, a lot of writers who wish they could be full-time writers or just want to write fiction. Let's jump into the fiction category, because that's where so many writers are. They just want to create these stories, but you can't, in today's market, make a career that way unless you have a really big name.
Yeah, I think it's really hard to break into fiction. And I think those that find success often do so by happenstance. They just got lucky. They got discovered by the right person at the right time. Personally, I don't feel any kind of gravitational pull towards writing fiction, not just because I don't think I could make a living from it, but just because of my attention span. Like I can bang out an article in a couple hours and get paid pretty well for it, and then I'm done with that project and I can move on to the next topic. I mean, it's funny because I am contemplating writing a couple of nonfiction books, which are going to take significantly more attention span, but just the idea of trying to come up with a plot and characters and make sure that they're all interwoven in this coherent story, and I'm not contradicting myself in chapter 16 versus what I said in chapter 3. It just doesn't have any appeal to me.
And it's a very good point. I applaud everyone who writes the long novels.
Yes.
So you started off as an HR executive. Is that correct?
Yeah, I was in HR for 10 years. My last role was as a director, so I never reached like C-suite or anything like that. But I was pretty high up in one of my latter roles.
And then you just took a side alley and ended up where you are now.
Yeah, I mean, it seemed kind of like it came out of left field, but not really. I think it's just been lifelong in the making. I've always liked writing. I wrote poetry as a kid. I got published in a local newspaper while I was in high school. In fact, I started to major in journalism when I was 18, just fresh into college. And then I decided, well, geez, I don't want to live my life around deadlines. Maybe I need to switch things up. And, flash forward, now I live my life around deadlines. But when I was 18, it didn't sound like a great idea. And I decided, okay, I'm going to pursue a different career path. I taught private preschool for a while, retail, eventually stumbled into HR, stuck around there for a while. And then, unfortunately, I experienced a death in the family in late 2017. And I had 3 days of bereavement leave to fly from Florida to Mass. My butt was parked in my cubicle on Monday. I had Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday off for the funeral, and then I was back in the cube on Friday. And it just left really bad taste in my mouth. Like, I know my employer didn't have to give me that time off technically, and I was grateful for it. So it was nothing against them, but it was really more just the fundamental idea of having to rush that process just didn't sit well with me. So at that time, I had amassed a fair amount of money in savings because I was considering trying to retire early. It's like, well, geez, if I can amass enough money and stay on this path, maybe I can retire before I hit age 50. And so here I am in my early 30s at the time. And, the passing of my grandfather made me realize, well, what else is going to happen between now and then in the next decade and a half that I'm not going to be able to respond to as I would like or as I would need. And so I realized I couldn't wait that long to kind of design my life in a way that really worked for me. So within a few months, I quit my full-time job. I still worked part-time for them for a little while, had some other income streams. So I wasn't completely relying on my savings as I tried to figure out what to do. Several months later, I had that aha moment with that paid guest post, and then things kind of snowballed from there. By, I'd say, mid 2019, I had fully replaced my corporate salary with freelance writing clients. And I said, okay, it's like there is absolutely no reason for me to look back now. Um, it's probably one of the best decisions I've ever made.
Oh, that's so interesting. So I want to ask one final question. How or what do you recommend for someone to do to run their own writing business? You are an entrepreneur, so
Yeah, and I do coach folks that are looking to get into freelancing, and there are a few things that I advise in general for everyone is to have a clear reason about why you're doing it. So a lot of people hate their jobs, right? But that's not necessarily a motivation to just leave it all behind and start your own business because it's challenging, it's hard. You need to have a why for pursuing this life. And for me, it's because I needed flexibility. I wanted a location and schedule independent way to earn a living. And this is the best way that I've found so far to accomplish that. If something better comes along in the future, I'm not afraid to jump ship. So, I'm not married to any one thing. But I do have a compelling why. I didn't hate my last job in HR. In fact, it was a great job, but something trumped that. And that's why I changed. I also think folks need to be networking all the time. You never know when you'll be able to help someone or when that person will be able to help you. So if you start building relationships within the niche that you want to write early, it can only benefit you. I wish that I had started writing guest posts much sooner because I think I could have built my portfolio a little quicker because even if you don't get paid, you still get a clip that's not your own website. And B, I could have started charging sooner because I had already had that experience. So it took getting paid to make me realize that I could get paid. So understand that this is a viable way to make money. A lot of people will look at you like you've gone mad. Oh, I want to make a living writing articles online. And they don't really get that that's a thing. It's a thing. It's a real thing. I can promise you that. I would definitely encourage folks that if they haven't been published online before, that they should start by creating their own website. Choose an avenue of expertise that's interesting to them and just really start writing a few quality pieces that A, showcase your expertise and B, showcase your ability to write. That way you can show that off to people and say, hey, I do have the ability to write. I am an expert. And then quickly parlay that into guest posts. So as you're building relationships online, you're writing on your own website, you say, hey, connection A, I have this website that's kind of complementary to yours. Would you be interested in my writing a guest post for your site? We have a really great rapport. Here's a link to my site so you can see what I know, what I stand for. And then once you get a couple of those guest posts under your belt, go forward and try to start to get your initial paid gigs. I also tell folks, don't write for free for long. Your time is valuable. It's worth it. Take a couple of those unpaid guest posts, maybe write for a small business, 1 or 2 articles for free in exchange for a testimonial, but then immediately start charging for your services thereafter. And it's okay to start small. I think I was probably making 10 cents a word out of the gate. And then with each subsequent client, I was increasing my rates. So that's another thing to keep in mind as well as that. As you gain more experience, as you get new and better clients, you have to charge what you're worth. And one of the great ways to know what you're worth is to network with other freelancers in your niche. They are not your enemy. They're not your competition. They can be a great source of referrals and a great source of industry intel. And I know that's a lot and I've been rambling, but I'm super passionate about this topic. So hopefully there's some inspirational nuggets in there.
So you keep talking about your clients. And so would that be just like a business like Morgan Stanley or, something like that? Or are we talking more like USA Today Finance?
Yeah, I mean, both of those would be examples. So, it could be a smaller business. I write for some small businesses that folks may not have heard of before, but I certainly also write for some of those household names as well. So each one of those is a client.
Well, fantastic. Laura Gariepy, thank you so much for all that information. How can people get in touch with you?
I'm available anytime through email, so please feel free to send me a note, laura@everydaybythelake.com. I'm also super active on Twitter, so that would be @everydaylake. And I'm very active on LinkedIn as well, so if you just Google Laura Gariepy, you should find me on there. And I look forward to connecting with you.
Are you ready to switch to our rapid fire questions?
Oh, yes, ma'am.
Do you have a favorite mug you like to drink from in the morning?
I do. It's a Golden Girls mug with each one of the characters' faces on it.
That's fun. Do you have a favorite piece of furniture in your house?
Yes, it is. Can it be a tie? Because I kind of have two.
Sure.
Okay. So it tied first place is the desk that my fiance built for me that I'm sitting at right now. And then right next to that desk is a bookcase my father built for me like 30 years ago. It's in rough shape, but still standing, and I use it proudly.
Oh, I love that. I love that. That's awesome. It's so nice when people can do things for you and you can just absorb the specialness of that creation.
Yes.
Last question. What is your dream vacation?
My dream vacation would be to hop in an RV and spend as much time as I'd like just driving around the continental US and exploring, all while getting paid handsomely to write about it.
Yeah, that's like barely a vacation, right?
Yeah, well, since my schedule would be flexible, I could write my article at 2 a.m. and do whatever I want during the day.
Oh, that's so much fun. Laura, thank you so much for stopping by.
Thank you, Allison.
You have been listening to another edition of the Florida Writer Podcast with your host, Alison Nissen. Allison out. Woo! We're all done.
Cool.
Laura Gariepy started writing about personal finance in early 2018 when she took a sabbatical from her career in human resources and launched a blog sharing her journey. She realized she could earn money and an independent living as a freelance writer. Laura loves to write about managing your money, navigating your career, and running a successful business. Her work has been featured in Fortune, USA Today, The New York Post, and many other publications. For more information about Laura, visit her at everydaybythelake.com. For more information about the Florida Writers Association, visit us at floridawriters.org. Until next time.